Um, so in some cases, the doctors don't even know that the research is being funded by people other than what it says on the actual report.
Yeah, I mean, how can you blame the surgeons there? You know, if you read a journal article in a respected journal that's gone through the normal peer review process and it says that the hip does extremely well, you know, the surgeons are the gateways from a product being used and having its effect on a patient. So if you basically hamstring the surgeons by the data that's available to them, you know, I feel terrible for the patients, but I feel very bad for some of those surgeons as well, because they did things in good faith. They wanted the best for the patients, and things were misrepresented to them. And it's not just the surgeons that the companies get in front of and essentially lie to, it's the FDA. I mean, there was a big day that the FDA conducted, I think it was 2012, 2013, where they tried to gather together everybody from the relevant manufacturers and present the data. And we know from, as you say, those litigations that the stuff that they were presenting wasn't true. You know, so obviously if they're going to misrepresent things to surgeons, it's not a, you know, they're going to misrepresent it to the world. So unfortunately that's just the way things are.
How do we get out of this? What do we do? I mean, what needs to change, or what could change that could possibly stop this? I mean, I feel like 510K, my goodness, like, who's watching? You know, the agency that's supposed to watch the companies and make sure they don't sell us stuff that's going to hurt us, which I have stuff implanted in me that, you know, who knows what it's going to do to my heart, my brain, my kidneys, my liver.
I mean, I don't know.
And if you don't know, you don't.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the right person to ask, but
okay.
But I mean, if you liken it to, I've said this quite a few times through the years, is if you liken it to air travel, planes don't go down. You know, statistically speaking, when you get on a plane, which is an incredibly complicated piece of equipment, a lot of steps, manufacturing issues, design issues, with fatal consequences if things go wrong. How are those so safe? Well, the thing is that, from what my understanding is, that the aviation industries did band together to some extent, and so there is regulation. And if a plane goes down, you saw that with the Malaysian Airlines that, you know, we still haven't found. If you think about the amount of millions that have gone into locating that wreck, it's not only for the relatives, but it's also to try and find out an answer. We desperately need to know an answer to why those things went wrong. With medical devices, the way things have been is that we basically, you know, if a jet goes down, a Boeing jet goes down, we give the Boeing jet back to Boeing and say, what went wrong, Boeing? And they go, pilot error. There's nothing wrong with the equipment. So there's no sort of independent regulation to actually study things that have gone wrong.
Well, we think, in America, we think that's what the FDA is. And we think that, you know, in Britain, what, the NHS would be the oversight body? Or
no, there's not. And so, for example, in the NHS, with the Pinnacle product, we know that a significant number of those products, not only is there a design issue, but they shouldn't have left the factory. You know, they weren't manufactured correctly. So the NHS is a public body, so we pay our taxes, so we are actually paying for those devices. We shouldn't have been sold those because they were defective. Is there any way that I'm aware of at all to raise this with the UK government? I'm not aware of anything. For me, it's quite a no-brainer. You know, the government bought these products, they didn't work, and they weren't manufactured correctly. If it was something else, like automobile or aerospace, I think there probably would be a mechanism, but in medical devices, and it just doesn't seem to be available.
But we're allowing it to not. We, as in the citizens of these multiple countries, are allowing it to be tolerated that it's not available. You know, you see what I'm saying? Like,
I think there's a lot of lack of knowledge because there's just not frameworks in place. So like I'm saying, even I, who do this for a living. I don't know whether there's an actual line of chain of command that I can report issues back to. In fact, the ones that I do, I know that the MHRA in England is the equivalent to the FDA, but I just don't know how it works, what they do. I work for the FDA as well. Well, not work for them, I better clarify that. I've been given grant research funding by the FDA, but I report back. I don't know what comes of any of that, you know, and it gets to a level where I think it's actually, these companies that produce products are so big, they produce so much in revenue for the government in terms of tax. I don't know, but I assume that behind the scenes these companies provide a lot of employment, a lot of money. Are they hard to criticise? I just don't know. I don't know.
Well, tell me about the cobalt and chromium. Go back. You've been studying this 10 years and multiple papers and multiple research, and you did your thesis on, like, tell me what you first started finding.
Well, we had the very first things we started to get back was the company, DePuy, actually funded the metal ion testing, and I was indirectly funded by them. And the first thing that we did was we got a batch of results back, and some of them were just, you know, a lot of them were very low, the chromium cobalt levels, but then some of them were really, really high. And some of them were really high in patients that were absolutely fine. I mean, they were running around, they were really, really happy with their hips. But it was such a new area that we just didn't really know what these levels meant. And I remember speaking to, oh man, it's so long ago, whether it was a rheumatologist or a toxicologist, and I showed him the levels that we were seeing. And he says, no, you're wrong. I was like, no, I don't think I'm wrong. I was like thinking, no, I'm probably wrong. But he goes, you're wrong, you've got the units wrong, you know, you've got the decimal point in the wrong place. And I said, no, that's definitely right. He goes, no, human body cannot tolerate this abuse. That's what he said to me, and it really stuck. And actually, it does actually seem that the human body is capable of tolerating levels better than we thought, thankfully. But that's in a systemic, you know, an overall health, you know, in terms of the patient's well-being at a few years follow-up. We don't know what happens long term, but we do know that when patients are exposed to high concentrations of these metallic products, that the local tissues, the hip, does not survive that well. You know, the elevated concentrations really do destroy bone, and they can damage muscles and soft tissue and things like that. So
have you seen that? Like, have you, like, in the surgery?
Yeah, I mean, it's when the levels or the wear rate goes above a certain level, the hip is black with metal. That is what happens. And
what would have been pink tissue or red tissue is black?
Yeah, it's called metallosis. It's well recognized. That, without doubt, is just in a nutshell what happens. And it was a long time till people actually really genuinely believe, when we showed the chromium cobalt levels even to the surgical and scientific community, they wouldn't believe that the chromium cobalt levels in the bloodstream were an accurate representation of what was going on in the hip. I mean, obviously it just sounds so commonsensical, but it really is like that. You know, if it's a straight line relationship, if the wear of the hip goes like that, you know, then the iron levels go like that. You know, it's just a straight line relationship, basically.
And what do the high ion levels do to the body systemically that you've seen?
That I've seen, I couldn't say definitively that there's evidence personally that there's issues. We know from previous studies that, you know, high cobalt levels, basically there was a study done in the 1670s where I can't remember which country it was in, where the country tried to increase the B vitamins in beer, and
it was an anti-foaming agent that they put in beer, and people died.
Yeah. I mean, I don't try and just wipe any of this off the interview because I don't want to be called.
Oh, okay.
Trying to be seen like I'm an expert on this, but basically we know that higher cobalt levels can be associated with heart damage.
Yeah, and cardiomyopathy. I have a girlfriend in the hospital today because so much of her heart's damaged. My heart is scarred, thickening the walls of the atrium. I mean, the septum and the left ventricular wall are both beginning to thicken, which you wouldn't see in a 45-year-old woman.
Yeah, I don't like to.
Well,
I'm worried. I don't want to like say too much.
Okay.
So
When you went forward to the company and you said, "Hey, we're seeing a problem here," what was their response, or what was the repercussion for you guys?
Mainly silence. You know, you meet the people who actually are making the decisions. You know, you don't realise at the time. You know, you meet people and you go, "Oh, that's such a body." You don't realise that these people are really key to decision-making processes in these multinationals. You know, it's just like, "Oh, there's such a body. Hi," you know, everything's nicey nice. Gradually doesn't get so nicey nice over time. And the main response is silence. It's like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting. Okay, yeah, we've not really seen that so much. Oh, okay, all right. Oh, it must be us then, is it? Yeah. Tony, it's your fault. Must be you, Tony. You know, Tony Nargle, the surgeon. Tony, you're not putting him in right." And it's sort of just like that. It genuinely is kind of it's a one-way exchange. We're just giving them stuff. There's nothing coming back. And after a year goes by of that, you start to become more confident in your opinions, and you start to really believe that, actually, you know what, we're right, you're wrong. And that's a long process. You don't go in there as if, "Oh man, I know everything about this subject, these guys have been doing it for years, I must know more than them." Obviously, you'd be stupid to think that. You actually think, well, you know, what they're telling us here, that we're not seeing problems around the world like you're seeing at your hospital, you kind of believe that. And if you're told that if you adjust your surgical technique or the way you align the components in the hip, that'll improve things, then you believe that.